Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about the up and coming fight, which I had completely actually forgotten about until someone overall actually recently reminded me on my channel in my comment section. So, thank you very much. I forget overall the man's uh, channel name or overall YouTube name, but thank you overall very much for that. Anyways, Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou. They're actually going to have an up-and-coming fight, not this Saturday, but this Friday. And then, of course, we have UFC 299 with the Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera fight as the main event. Also with Dustin Poirier versus that one French fighter, I believe that he's fighting. And a few other good fights as well. And potentially I might actually go live for both of them. I especially might go live for the AJ Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou fight because I'm going to be very highly interested, of course, in this fight. Now, of course, this is going to be one of the world's top boxers, at least in the heavyweight division, with AJ Anthony Joshua versus still somewhat of an MMA fighter, and that of Francis Ngannou. But of course, Francis Ngannou, he did somewhat shock the world a little bit because a lot of people seeing him give Tyson Fury, who in my view is the unanimous best heavyweight of his generation, at least at the moment. He ended up giving him a lot of problems. In fact, to the point to where a lot of people thought that debatably that Francis Ngannou could have won that fight. Now, in my view, Tyson Fury, I thought that he had just pulled out the fight. I thought that he had just won, but I only had it by 1 point. And if you had Francis Ngannou winning that fight, I can't really blame you too harshly. Of course, a lot of people are going to claim robbery. It wasn't really a robbery, but if you were to debate that Tyson Fury debatably should have lost that fight, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. So, the question is about Francis Ngannou, who of course was the former UFC World Heavyweight Champion at the heavyweight division. When it came down to it, did he end up looking so good against Tyson Fury? Because Tyson Fury maybe is just a bit older. He is overall about 35 to 36 years old, I believe. Was it because Tyson Fury maybe was trying to make it look competitive and maybe was carrying him a little bit, or was it because Tyson Fury, didn't really take him that seriously? In my personal view, I think that Fury, I think that he thought that Francis Ngannou, I think that he thought overall that he was going to be a lot easier than what he was going to be. I think he thought overall that this dude, he's not going to be able to move his head that well. He's going to be able to gas out within 3 rounds. I'm pretty much going to knock this dude out within 5 to 6 rounds, if it even lasts that long. He's going to feel my right hand. He's going to feel my power and my size, and he's not going to be able to handle my speed. He's not overall going to be able to handle my feet. But unfortunately for Tyson Fury, at least in some of those moments, now of course he ended up winning the fight. Tyson Fury overall was proved very much wrong because Francis Ngannou actually showed certain boxing skills in that fight that overall that I did not know that he was really capable of. He didn't bite on every single feint. He actually knew how to probe the jab, not just, somewhat land the jab, but probe the jab out there and not bite on the feints, but use it as a distance range finder when it comes down to it, and really actually boxing someone intelligently, at least for what he's capable of. Now, the question is, can he possibly defeat AJ Anthony Joshua, especially now that the boxing world knows somewhat of what Francis Ngannou is capable of, even in that of a boxing match? We'll see what happens. But anyways, these guys are going to talk about it. Let's tune in.
Knockout chaos is what it's being billed as. Anthony Joshua, former unified heavyweight champion, takes on former UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou. Let's get the thoughts of the guys. Chris, start with you. It's a fight we didn't expect, right? No one asked for, but all of a sudden, people are excited about this one.
Yeah, they're excited because Francis Ngannou proved himself in that Tyson Fury fight. Whether you thought he won or lost, he was the most impressive MMA cross.
I remember that knockdown against Tyson Fury, and the reason why Tyson Fury ended up getting knocked down there is because he threw a right hand and he did not really move out of the way. You see, Tyson Fury is a great all-around fighter when he's at his best, but even he, when it comes down to it, and he adjusted as the rounds went along, so I'll at least give him that amount of credit, but even he has a little bit of faults here and there, at least in a little bit of his style, especially because you can tell that not a lot of fighters can deal with his height and his size, including that of Vladimir Klitschko and Deontay Wilder. They were not accustomed to the size of that of Tyson Fury. And there was even certain times where Klitschko or Wilder, especially Wilder, potentially could have caught that of Tyson Fury. But Wilder, because his boxing IQ was so low, and because he's usually such a one-dimensional striker when it comes down to it, he was not able to catch him at some times. Now, I guess it depends on the fight. In the second fight, Tyson Fury pretty much adjusted, very, very well. But in the third fight, for example, Tyson Fury, I think he didn't take Wilder quite as seriously, and I think overall that he kind of was playing with Wilder a little bit, or if you don't want to say playing, then kind of overall carrying him a little bit, and I think overall that he was maybe trying to make it a little bit more entertaining for himself when it came down to it, and I think he ended up getting caught a couple times in the fourth round. And then afterwards, he had to move his head a little bit better. But even then, he would still get caught here and there. So Fury, even though he's a great all-around fighter and boxer and highly skilled boxer when, he's at his best, Tyson Fury also needs to watch out because you can tell that, his size and his height and his reach, he knows that a lot of the times he has the advantage with that. And sometimes it, creates little lapses over on his defense here and there, even though he can be a very good defensive fighter at his best. But that's the reason why he got knocked down. He threw the right hand. He didn't move outside of the range. And Ngannou countered it over the top with the left hand. And he did it perfectly.
Over fighter we've ever seen. Putting Tyson Fury down and being competitive as a boxer throughout the 10 rounds of this fight. And AJ, I think, has accomplished what he set out to accomplish in 2023, which was become a contender once again, rebuild in the way they did, getting those 3 wins, most notably the most impressive one against Otto Wallen. But when I think about this fight, like, as good as Ngannou looked against Fury, it's that old Rocky line, like, this guy's all wrong for you, baby. Like, this guy, like, I think AJ is all wrong for Francis Ngannou because AJ is...
This is going to be a little bit of an interesting fight because I'm not really kind of sure what type of version of Anthony Joshua is going to come out. Anthony Joshua, even though I think that he has a lot of heart, and I'm not going to state that he's necessarily afraid of his opponents, but Anthony Joshua has shown in the past that he can have a little bit of anxiety issues, in the past, and that you can get him to kind of doubt himself, especially if you can hit him or if he possibly fears your power or anything like that. Now, that being said, Anthony Joshua, with the type of styles that he usually has problems with, it's usually the shorter and the quicker guys. People like Joseph Parker, Andrew Ruiz, Alexander Usyk, guys like that, guys that can somewhat either use their feet or get inside on his range and kind of get him on the inside a little bit. Francis Ngannou is not really that type of fighter. Francis Ngannou is more of a guy that's going to be around AJ Anthony Joshua's size. He's going to probe his jab more than likely a lot, and he's going to be very reactionary. Very reactionary. He's going to be waiting to see what Anthony Joshua throws, and he's going to be looking to counter. So if I have to predict, I think that Anthony Joshua, I think that more than likely he's going to win this fight. But I'm not quite sure if he's going to dominate Francis Ngannou or if it's at least going to be in the sense that a lot of people think that it is. I think that debatably it could be more dominant than what it was versus Tyson Fury, because I think that Fury completely underestimated the ability and the athleticism of Francis Ngannou, and then he figured out that he had a little bit more ability and also a decent amount of athleticism to boot. Now, I think that Tyson Fury knew that Ngannou was a great athlete, but I think that he took a look at this guy and he said, MMA fighters, they're not really going to have the same amount of power in their punches. I dealt with Deontay Wilder, the hardest puncher debatably of all time, or at least certainly of my generation when it comes down to it. I was able to deal with that guy. This guy is really no threat to me. I pretty much am going to make this look easy, and he figured very much wrong. So once again, I would predict AJ more than likely to win this fight. Probably, 8 rounds to 2, 7 rounds to 3, somewhere around there. If not win every single round in the fight, who knows? But I'm not quite sure if I'm just going to go and predict that AJ's just going to go ballistic and just try to knock Francis Ngannou out with no problem. I think AJ thinks that Francis Ngannou, that he is a real threat, at least in terms of power. And I think that he realizes that this guy is a serious threat in terms of if he actually catches him. And if he does catch AJ, we do know that AJ can be rocked. He does not have the chin of a Tyson Fury. Even though Fury can be knocked down, Fury has great belief in himself, greater belief in himself, a higher skill set than AJ Anthony Joshua. And on top of that, he's usually better conditioned. I'm not sure if he was that fight, but, either way, I'm not quite sure if AJ Anthony Joshua is going to go balls to the wall in this fight. I just don't see that happening. I think that if a stoppage happens, that, from AJ's side anyway, that AJ will probably get it later on in the fight. I just don't know if it's going to happen early. I could be wrong, but we'll see.
He's more of a hitter, whereas Fury is more of a boxer. I think that power...
Well, Tyson Fury has a grade level power. Like a lot of people overall will sit here and try to state that, Tyson Fury doesn't have this power, especially these LDBC and new media boys. They always try to say that Fury cheated in the Wilder fights and that he had pillow hands, acting like he didn't have 19 or 20 knockouts before he fought Wilder, within 20 or 30 some fights, but it is what it is. Anyways, when it comes down to it, Fury is an A- level puncher at the very least, but AJ Anthony Joshua, at least for a boxer, is probably an A+ to A level puncher. So definitely, no doubt about it. He definitely is a bigger puncher than that of Tyson Fury. And he might be a little bit more prepared for that of Francis Ngannou. So it's very possible that AJ Anthony Joshua, that he could look more impressive against Francis Ngannou. I expect that. But we'll see.
Is something Francis Ngannou, the novice boxer, is going to have a lot of problems with.
Did you see anything in the Fury fight to think this will be competitive for at least a few rounds?
Well, I tell you what he did show in it.
I do think overall that it's going to be somewhat competitive for a few rounds, or I think overall that it's at least going to be a fight to where, once again, I don't think it's going to be as domineering or as dominant as what a lot of people try to think that it's going to be or think that it's going to be. I think that AJ Anthony Joshua is going to take him very seriously, and I think that, of course, in AJ's favor, it would look great if he's dominant and knocks Francis Ngannou out within 5 to 6 rounds. Do I think that's going to happen? Not me personally. I think that AJ Anthony Joshua, I think that he's going to try to touch him up with a jab. I think he's going to be very careful overall, once again, of what Ngannou is going to react with, and I think he's going to kind of feel him out for a few rounds. I just don't see AJ Anthony Joshua really going balls to the wall with Francis Ngannou. I don't see that happening.
In the Fury fights, good structure. He didn't make, he turned from the core when he threw the right hand. I watched him because all we had is what he did in the UFC. And when he threw that right hand, he brought the right foot forward every time, obviously to grab and all the stuff, the technical stuff that they do in that combat sport. But he didn't do that. He kept the shape. He looked like the boxer of the two on that night, to be honest. But I agree with Chris. I think in this fight, you think it'd be an easier fight because he's going to have a guy who's right in front of him, not a guy who's quite elusive. But I think with Fury's magic and the mistakes he makes is because he gives you opportunities. So with that, you can knock him down and hurt him, or he makes you look really silly and plays with you. But he invites.
Let me also state this. I always have a conversation with one of my friends who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, or at least overall recently got into Jiu-Jitsu. One of my very, very great friends now for really the past 10 years or somewhere around there. We always have debates about boxing and all sort of stuff, and he believes that boxing personally is not that useful of an art or not that useful of a fighting style. And if you're talking about in an actual MMA fight, then, it's somewhat correct because, when you talk about just having boxing, versus that of jiu-jitsu or some of the other combat sports, yeah, you could debate that, over a Muay Thai or that of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that it's more useful than that of boxing. But when you have boxing experience and boxing training combined with that of MMA training, it is an invaluable art to learn. And the reason why that is because when you talk about hand-to-hand combat, which a lot of the times is where a fight starts, there's no better practitioners with their hands than that of boxers, period. You're not going to find overall an elite level Muay Thai artist that is better than a professional level boxer, A-grade level boxer. It is what it is. You're not going to find someone in Taekwondo or someone overall in some of those other striking areas. You're not going to find, someone overall who is better than a professional boxer in those areas, at least in hand-to-hand combat. And my friend overall said, oh, well, even Fury had a lot of problems against Ngannou, and he never really boxed before. Well, Ngannou actually, you can tell, has a little bit of boxing experience. And that's why he didn't bite on as many feints as Fury. But on top of that, it was very clear that Fury, that he thought that Ngannou overall was going to be, that he thought that he was going to be a piece of cake. That he thought that he was going to be able to intimidate this guy, very early on. And then when he figured out that he couldn't, he had to be very careful with that guy and that he had to be a little bit, light in that fight. Meaning overall that he couldn't just go balls to the wall like what he did with Deontay Wilder. He was trying overall, once again, to hit him in the mouth early, kind of like Mike Tyson style. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. He thought that he was going to be able to bully that of Francis Ngannou like what he did Deontay Wilder, because Wilder is a very one-dimensional fighter, and on top of that, he was all the way up in Deontay Wilder's head. He had him wrapped around his finger. But Francis Ngannou, he had great belief in himself, and on top of that, he was a little bit better and even more powerful than what Tyson Fury once originally thought. And there was a couple of times where Fury was hurt in that fight. So I think that if a rematch ended up ever happening between those guys, I think that more than likely at least at Fury, if he's still at a great point in his career. And there's, who knows, because, he is about 36 years old, so we'll see. But when it comes down to it, I think more than likely that a rematch, it would look way more dominant for Fury. But, it is what it is.
He invites the trouble, he invites the fight, he invites the punches. With Joshua, especially as he showed in his last fight again, a little bit of a bounce to his step, a little in and out, he'll throw some feints, and because you'll see him in front of you, but his hands are always high, his elbows are always tucked in tight. So even though you have an opponent, you don't have a massive target. With Fury, he might not stand in front of you, but his hands are here. So you see the big target. So you just got to advance your feet forward, and hopefully,
I do agree with that. Sometimes Tyson Fury's hands need to be a little bit higher. Now, sometimes, he can keep his hands overall, high when he needs to. But there's other times where he needs to, keep them a little bit higher. Sometimes he keeps his right hand down a little bit too low, and he stayed in the range for way too long against Ngannou. He thought that he was going to push him back and intimidate Ngannou with that right hand, and it turned out that Ngannou had a plan for it, and he ended up knocking him on his ass.
he doesn't get out of the way. But against Joshua, he's gonna try and look for the target, because he's going to see the hands here and not see much of that triangle in front of you, if you like, which is the target you hit.
But I will say this, AJ Anthony Joshua does have a stiffer head, and overall not nearly as good a head movement nor foot movement as that of Tyson Fury, even in that last fight. So, once again, that's going to be very interesting, because Joshua, I don't think that he's a bad fighter by any means, but he definitely is not the most maneuverable, so we'll see.
And I think that he's going to struggle with that. And also, he's going to have a guy who punches clean, straight and direct, right at him. And I think the jab has always been the problem for AJ since Randy Ruiz won, is the most important punch again in this fight. If he bangs a big, heavy jab on Francis Ngannou as Ngannou comes forward, that's probably something he's never experienced before.
Sergio, are you okay with this fight?
The jab is going to be very essential for both fighters in this fight, but especially for AJ Anthony Joshua. But the thing is with AJ Anthony Joshua is that at certain times, if you're able to get certain punches in there, you can actually get him to abandon his jab. And that's what happens with a lot of elite fighters, or just, a lot of fighters in general. Not elite fighters, but a lot of fighters. When they meet someone that is a better jabber than them, because they're afraid of getting hit, they immediately abandon it. And I somewhat understand the mindset, but you can't abandon the jab, because the jab is something that's always going to set up punches. It's something that's always going to get you in there at your target in the first place. If you abandon the jab, you're not winning the fight, at least not usually.
And what I mean by that is that
And Anthony Joshua is going to have to throw a certain amount of feints. He's going to have to go up and down, but he's also going to have to try to change the levels a little bit. Sometimes he's a bit too stiff.
a lot of people saying, okay, AJ should maybe go down the traditional boxing route of a Hrgovic, maybe a Zhili Zhang, potentially even a Joseph Parker rematch, because Parker looks so good against Wilder. Are you okay with AJ kind of putting that to the side for this fight and taking on Ngannou?
He's a prize fighter, and they're fighting for a big prize. So yeah, I can't hate on this one, and the fact that there's a storyline there, you could actually market it. Ngannou put down the lineal champion of the world. Now the former two-time heavyweight champion in Joshua has a chance to knock out the guy that just put down the champ. So it's a good storyline. You can package it up, you can sell it, you can market it.
I definitely think that you can market it, and I think that's exactly why they took this fight. I think that everything ended up exactly as Eddie Hearn wanted it to. With Wilder losing to that of Joseph Parker and AJ looking great in his last fight. This pretty much overall, once again, that this is the worst nightmare that could have ever happened for Deontay Wilder fans. Literally everything that's happened to Deontay Wilder overall within the past few years, or the past several years, it's literally been within their nightmares. The LDBC and new media has been very depressed ever since Deontay Wilder has lost those fights. And I'm not someone overall that's here to kick anyone down, but the Deontay Wilder fan base was very disrespectful of not only Tyson Fury, but a certain amount of other fighters as well, including AJ Anthony Joshua. So any criticism or anything that they get, as well as Wilder, it's well warranted, because at the end of the day, Wilder a lot of the times couldn't keep his mouth shut either. It is what it is. But once again, pretty much could have not ended up any worse. Deontay Wilder in the first fight against Tyson Fury, when it comes down to it, it was a draw. Really a fight that Wilder probably should have lost when it came down to it. Then in the rematch against Fury, gets his ass completely kicked. They keep alleging over all this cheating allegations. And in the third fight, Wilder gets knocked out even worse. When it comes down to it, then it comes overall, to the AJ thing, and it looks like at least they could debate that Wilder, is over AJ Anthony Joshua. But then Deontay Wilder, he fights a former opponent of AJ in Joseph Parker, someone that hasn't been a champion in years, and someone that was stopped only a year ago. And Wilder loses basically every single round in the fight. So they can't even debate that Wilder, at least at the moment, is the second best heavyweight. So once again, a lot of those guys overall, are very depressed. Or of course they're going to go along the lines of saying that, oh, well, had they fought several years ago, Wilder would have won and all sort of stuff. And, that's very possible. But once again, it's just, once again, could have not ended up any worse, for Deontay Wilder fans and that of the LDBC and new media for the heavyweight division picture. Could have not ended up any worse.
See it. Both fighters are going to make a boatload of money. God bless Francis Ngannou.
Story.
No, listen. I'm not an MMA fan, but when I read up on him, when I was, talking about the fight with Fury, incredible story that he has, and you can't teach power. So he has that. You can't teach the courage and the story that he's gone through.
Let me also state this. I remember when Francis Ngannou became champion and out of the UFC, and now in the first fight against Stipe Miocic, who of course is, in my view, the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time, at least when it comes to the UFC. The first fight, of course, Stipe Miocic, or Miocic, however you want to pronounce it, he ended up dominating Francis Ngannou in the first fight because Ngannou thought that he was just going to be able to knock him out within 1 or 2 rounds. He had no stamina. He didn't have great wrestling experience. And even after the amount of punches and, all the strikes that he took, he still was able to last all 5 rounds, even as gassed as what he was. So I'll give Ngannou this. He definitely has a chin on him. And that's why, I'm also going to be very interested to see, overall how AJ reacts if he gets hit and if he hits Ngannou. And Ngannou overall, doesn't flinch. Or I'm not going to say doesn't flinch, but, overall doesn't seem as hurt as what he once thought he was going to be. But I remember the rematch against Stipe Miocic. I remember when Stipe tried to take him down when the strikes weren't working. And as soon as Ngannou overall was able to turn around Stipe, I knew that Stipe was in a lot of trouble because Ngannou was just the all-around stronger guy. And if he was going to be able to outtake Stipe in the wrestling, the striking was just going to be way too risky because one of the faults that Stipe does have is that he's a little bit too stiff sometimes with his head movement, a little bit too stiff. Even though he's not the worst boxer for an MMA fighter, I believe that he was even a former a former Golden Gloves boxer. So Stipe is not the worst boxer in the world, but he also doesn't move his head very well. At least a lot of the times. It is what it is. But still a great fighter. But, I also remember when they were talking about that Francis Ngannou-John Jones fight. And the narrative now, of course, within the MMA community, now that John became UFC heavyweight champion, they stated overall that John Jones, that, Francis is afraid of John Jones. And that's why I always say that whoever the winners are in history, that's basically where the narrative follows. Like now, a lot of people overall, they always used to say that, oh, AJ, Anthony Joshua, that he was afraid of Wilder. I never completely agreed with that, but a lot of people did. Now that Wilder lost to Joseph Parker, and now that AJ's career looks a little bit better in hindsight, now it's going to be the other way around. Well, the truth is about that John Jones versus Francis Ngannou fight, John Jones clearly wanted a very big payday to fight that Francis Ngannou when it came down to it because he knew that Francis Ngannou was a humongous threat. So you have a certain amount of the people in the MMA community or the MMA fans that are stating that Francis avoided that fight. No, Francis didn't avoid that fight. Francis overall was asking for that fight for a couple of years. John Jones literally basically was in retirement for a couple of years because he knew that Francis Ngannou was a humongous threat when it came down to it, and he basically said that he wanted a major payday or that he was not taking the fight, which in my view, isn't the worst, thing in the world. I don't mind overall a guy who is debatably the greatest UFC fighter of all time asking overall for an event like that to be paid more overall than what he usually is. And of course, we all know that Dana White pays his fighters peanuts, at least compared to that, of sometimes of other sports. So, I get it. But at the end of the day, saying all this stuff about Francis avoiding John Jones, all that is a bunch of bullshit. John Jones knew that Francis was a humongous threat, and for 2 years he basically stayed out of MMA because he wanted to transition to the heavyweight division, but he knew Francis was a humongous threat.
Everything he's gone through in his life, he brings that into the ring. He wanted to be a boxer before an MMA fighter, so he has that background. But now he's in there with a fighter that in Joshua. That's a big man, huge man, just like Fury, but different styles, different fight. I think Fury didn't take him serious. He took him lightly.
I don't think he did either.
and he paid for it. Joshua, on the other hand, we know he's been fragile. He's not going to take him. He's not going to take him for granted. I think he's an excellent fighter when it comes to fighting other big men.
And Sergio Moro said that he's been fragile. And once again, that's why this fight's also going to be a little bit interesting. I'm not going to say that Anthony Joshua is necessarily fragile, but I think that you can get him to doubt himself.
I think he puts down and knocks out Ngannou in sensational fashion. Then maybe we can have Joshua fight a real heavyweight. But for right now...
And if AJ does knock out Francis Ngannou or look very dominant against him, that pretty much would be the plan overall to really market that Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua fight. That's really what the main plan is if it ends up coming to fruition. But we'll see.
This is a great, marketable fight.
And I think Ngannou kind of said it, where there's not going to be any surprises in this fight. There's no question Tyson Fury was surprised by what he saw, what was in front of him. Both the power, the technique, all the things. I mean, Ngannou, masterful digital game of rope-a-dope in the months prior to that fight, because all the videos we saw of Francis Ngannou made it look like he was just lost in the boxing ring. Then he's coming out, he's on his toes, he's throwing combinations. Everyone was so
switched to
nervous.
southpaw a couple
He's
of times,
switching stances. He's power with both hands. So the surprise factor is gone. With Anthony Joshua. And with Ben Davison, who is now, they clearly have some chemistry, the two of them. They're going to be prepared. They're going to have a game plan for this. They're not going to be shocked when Ngannou comes out and looks more like a boxer than a brawler.
The crazy thing is,
Ngannou, in my view, when it comes down to it, is that he's going to have to really try to make this fight a little bit more of a brawl and really get inside against that of Anthony Joshua. That's what he's going to have to do. Because, in my view, when it comes down to it, if he tries to completely outbox that of Anthony Joshua the whole entire time, AJ, he's probably not going to completely, kick his ass or knock him out. But at the end of the day, he is going to get the clear-cut decision.
How good Ngannou is. How do you judge him on one fight? It was against, arguably the best heavyweight on the planet right now, on paper.
Not really arguably. Really undisputed and really not that relatively close. There's no other heavyweight overall of this generation that could be debated as better. Who really is better? I mean, well, some might say Alexander Usyk, but and I like Usyk. Usyk is a phenomenal fighter. Even in certain categories you can say better than Fury. But and of course there'd be certain categories where maybe Fury might be better than him as well. But, at the end of the day, Usyk, only has a win against one great heavyweight fighter. At least Tyson Fury can state that he beat two of the great fighters of his generation in Wilder and that of Vladimir Klitschko. And he also beat Dillian White. So Usyk, even though he has more belts at the moment, I'm not quite sure if I can say that he's the best of that weight class. But, if you wanted to state that, then I get it.
But still, it could still be rubbish. Or he could be absolutely brilliant.
Let me give you two reasons why I think Ngannou's going to do better in this fight than maybe former world champion thinks it's going to be. He always throws it in my face. First of all, I did a triathlon 10 years ago. Let me tell you a personal story here. I did a triathlon 10 years ago, right? I trained for it for 6 months. I started. I felt good in the swim. I was doing the run. I was doing the cycling. I was like, I'm starting to get a little tired, but I could push further. I was like, no, let me lay back a little bit. I've never done a triathlon before. I don't know what it's going to be like by the time I get to the run. I got to the run. I started cramping up. I slowed down. When all was said and done, I finished, and I was like, man, I could have done this 30 minutes faster next time. I'll be so much better because I know what it's like. Ngannou even said, I have no idea what it's like to go 10 rounds against Tyson Fury. And you could see even when he had him in trouble, he never really got aggressive. He just stayed very calm. And why all of a sudden is Anthony Joshua this killer again, by the way? He beat up Otto Wallen and got the knockout after looking very pedestrian for 6 rounds. If he fights the way he was fighting then, which was very tentative, I think this could be a real 10-round stinker and be very boring where AJ's very hesitant.
I agree with you, sir, and that's the same exact wonder that I had. Once again, I'm not quite sure if AJ is just going to go in there and completely tarnish and knock out Francis Ngannou. He might be very tentative to throw. This might look very similar to the Robert Elenius fight. Possibly without a knockout.
Tyson was, because if he gets in there and starts to see that Ngannou's better than maybe he thought he was, he's going to be like, wait a minute, I can't lose this fight either, or I'm done. My career's done. So I think that maybe Ngannou's going to be more confident this time and might force AJ into revert to some of those old bad habits.
Yeah, but he's seen 10 rounds of boxing, right, against a championship level boxer. He hasn't seen 10 rounds of power. And look, maybe we're never going to get.
Tyson Fury has power. He just doesn't have quite as much power as that of Anthony Joshua. Like, people try to act like like Tyson Fury is like the heavyweight Paulie Malignaggi or something like that. Tyson Fury is 280 pounds, and on top of that, he's already a decent puncher anyway. That's why Tyson Fury has 20-some knockouts and 30-something fights.
The AJ that was,
Now, is he Deontay Wilder or George Foreman or Mike Tyson, overall for his size? No, not necessarily, but he has decent power.
throwing punches at Dillian White, that was hunting down Charles Martin. Maybe that guy's gone forever. But if Otto Wallin had come out of the corner for that last round, we probably would have seen something devastating. His nose was busted. Joey Gamage saved him in that fight from that highlight reel type of knockout.
But Wallin didn't have any power to scare AJ.
Didn't have any power to scare AJ,
Yeah,
but
he doesn't have that frame either.
Yeah.
Does it? Yeah.
but he doesn't. But there's nothing that a guy like Ngannou can do to prepare for what's coming from Anthony Joshua. I mean, whether or not he's throwing 6-7 punch combinations, the 1-2s are going to be really hard. And they're going to be a unique experience for him because he's never been hit like that with those types of gloves with that type of style.
I think as well.
I want to see if AJ Anthony Joshua, once again, if he really is super courageous enough to the point to where he's going to be willing to bite on that, or whether, he's going to be really willing to pressure Ngannou. If he is, as dominant as what he was in the Otto Wallin fight, I have no doubt about it that he can knock Francis Ngannou out within 7 rounds, if not even a little bit under. But I'm just not quite sure if AJ is going to do that.
The thing with Joshua, what we've seen, and you're right, he's not where he was, but I think there's been an improvement from the Franklin fight on, even though the Helenius fight wasn't great. But the finish was the first time that I think that he actually committed to an attack and it worked. I think that fight he knew.
Mr. Robert Helenius, that big old lug. That dude has no head movement whatsoever.
I committed with that jab, and it's always the jab with him. You commit with that jab, and then because I committed with that jab, I could punch right through the target with the right hand. Now, before that, he was touching.
Terrible defensive maneuver. No head movement, and on top of that, but Robert Helenius is another one of these guys that's about 6'7", and you can tell that when fighters back up like that, a lot of the times they understand that their height and their reach is enough usually to avoid punches, but that's a terrible defensive maneuver. First of all, his chin was wide up in the air, and then second of all, he moves straight back in a linear line when it comes down to it, and then his hands are down. It's like, come on.
Touching. And I couldn't understand why he wasn't knocking people out anymore. Because he was doing what I would do, what we would do. You move in, you're already thinking about the next move back, so you don't get hit again. That's clever boxing, but not for him. Mm-hmm. But he showed it in that knockout, and I think that in the Wallin fight, he come into that fight a much more confident guy, because you can train for stuff, but until you actually do it in practice.
Sorry, you're talking about confident. You were there for the stare down between AJ and Ngannou. Did AJ exude confidence that he's going to kill this guy?
No.
Did you sense that?
No, not at all.
He doesn't need to kill this guy.
AJ did say, I think, in the aftermath of it, I think because someone maybe clipped up the fact that he kind of took his face away first and they stared at him. He's like, it means nothing.
That means nothing.
It means nothing. You're going to get in the ring and we're going to show you what I can do.
But you can look at stuff like that. You know more than us. So you've been in bigger fights where, like that telling people you're not scared.
Well, people always try to, break down and, be a major psychologist when it comes down to it overall, and I kind of like to break down things psychologically as well. I have a great interest in psychology and other stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if you've been around fighting long enough, the truth is that, you can kind of sense when someone's energy is definitely changing, especially if it's noticeable. Like when Wilder was in the press conference against Fury in the third fight, you could tell that he definitely was nervous and that Fury was definitely in his head. You can tell when someone is in someone's head. Or Porter, when he fought that at Errol Spence Jr., you could tell that he definitely feared Errol Spence a little bit, or that he had a high level of respect for him. When it comes down to it, you can kind of tell certain energies like that. But a lot of people try to take a look at how, the way someone looks at somebody, or if they look away first, or, if they have their head down, blah, 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 some of this stuff like that. Sometimes it's not always about that. Sometimes overall, and they might be thinking a certain way, but, overall, once they're in the ring, sometimes you're just going to see it like that.
Important, but ultimately.
Now, sometimes we can, dictate things from body language, but not always.
You don't lose a fight in a stare down. I think him being a guy, I don't think he's got to run through Ngannou. He has to be clever with his feet. I think he can outbox him, and with that, within 5-6 rounds, that outboxing him can stop him.
Because it's interesting though. When I looked at both of those, like physically, every time I've done an AJ fight, AJ physically is the biggest person in the room. Like he's almost intimidating these guys because of his height and his size. Ngannou's as big, a little shorter in terms of height. I think Ngannou's about 6'3", AJ 6'5". But in terms of just physical, AJ knows in the ring he's not the bully for.
Ngannou might actually be bigger than that of AJ Anthony Joshua. A part of the reason why Fury actually had a little bit of problems with him is because Fury had never felt that type of size before. Fury overall is a super heavyweight fighter. He's a guy overall, once again, he's a guy that's 280 pounds. When it comes down to Francis Ngannou is about 270. So that dude's nothing to fuck around with.
First time, whereas normally he is that on the front foot bullying guys with his presence. What do you make, very quickly actually guys, before we do wrap, AJ spoke about Derek James and this training setup, and I think he was asked, are you still working with Derek James? And he's like, yeah, Derek James is still part of this camp. I don't know how that works. Ben Davison, Derek James, Lee Wiley, what's going on?
There's too many. I can't say that can work. You've got to have one voice. Ultimately, when you've got a guy who's experienced as he is, you can't change him. No, he is what he is. You just got to remind him what he's good at. So it's almost just simplifying things. I think he overthinks stuff. So you almost say, listen, Anthony, we'll do the thinking for you, pretty much. And then everyone will take you out and you do 1 or 2, 3 things. That's it. That's all you need to do. I mean,
and that is Ben Davison, Lee Wiley.
Yeah, you just need to find someone you've got chemistry with, and you can have someone you have no chemistry with, or you can jump into someone you have great chemistry with. I'm reminded of what Miguel Cotto did in the twilight of his career. Wound up working with Freddie Roach, and won a world title after that. They just had some great chemistry.
Cotto, in my view, one of the more underrated fighters probably of all time. Miguel Cotto, in my view, is right there with Oscar De La Hoya. Probably Sugar Shea Mosley, Tommy Hearns. He's right there with those guys.
It looks like from the outside that Anthony Joshua and Ben Davison and his team have great chemistry.
On this AJ, where AJ is thing, obviously, look, Fury and Usyk are number 1 and 2, whichever order you want to put it. Who is the third best heavyweight in boxing right now? Is it AJ?
The third best heavyweight right now, in my view, would definitively be AJ Anthony Joshua. I think that he has enough of a resume. I think that debatably in terms of skills, you could debate him there. But in terms of accomplishments and in terms of resume, he's at least the third. Some would even debate second. But, after that, those Usyk losses, I just don't think that you can debate it anymore.
Is it Zhili Zhang? Is AJ the third best now because of that 2023 run, or is there still debates to be had?
I want to see what John can do next.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see what he hasn't gotten that big opportunity yet. Once we see how good he is, it's hard to say he's third. I mean, AJ's gotten a lot of mulligans, right? He's lost to Usyk twice. He's looked bad in a couple other fights. Ruiz put him down. So to just say he's third now because he beat up Otto Wallen is to me more of a testament that AJ's a popular guy more than the third best heavy.
I do understand where you're coming from. But to be fair, AJ Anthony Joshua, other than losing that to Alexander Usyk, who is already one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters anyway, on a lot of people's lists, when it came down to it, and of course that one loss to Ruiz, AJ Anthony Joshua has a tremendous heavyweight resume. He beat Andrew Ruiz, Alexander Povetkin, Dillian White, Charles Martin. When it came down to it, Joseph Parker, some other guys. He recently defeated Otto Wallin. He defeated some other guys. So AJ has a tremendous heavyweight resume. Kubrat Pulev.
Weight in the world.
How about Joseph Parker? Why not? I mean, he just beat Deontay Wilder.
I can't put Joseph Parker above that of AJ Anthony Joshua. Now when AJ had the titles not too long ago, and on top of that, Joseph Parker, yes, he defeated a Deontay Wilder, and that's great, but I really don't even know if Wilder is quite the same fighter. And on top of that, Joseph Parker just ended up getting stopped overall a year ago by Joe Joyce, a guy who's never even won a title.
I mean, that's very.
Yeah, I feel like he's not getting enough plaudits.
He's not getting enough credit. He's a former.
Everyone's more like looking at.
Yeah, but Wilder looked like
champion.
a ghost. That's why.
But I'll give Joseph Parker credit for that fight. That was the best performance of his career by far.
A lot of people aren't giving him
It doesn't
credit.
matter. He's a former champion. He beat Wilder. I mean, that was an exciting fight. Joseph Parker has all the skills. He's still young enough. He's still growing. He's found a new confidence in a new trainer. I mean, Joseph Parker's a legit threat now to heavyweight.
The third best heavyweight.
I'd love to see a rematch between AJ Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker, but we'll see.
Is Filip Perkovic. That's the third best heavyweight in boxing. Because Filip Perkovic beat Jalen.
He did it.
We'll see about Mr. Filip Perkovic. I think that, he has a lot of experience, but he also has some holes sometimes. I also think he's a little bit too hittable and straightforward for his own good, but he's getting better as time goes along, and he's a very dangerous fighter. Very dangerous fighter. So anyone who fights him is going to have to watch out.
Record books. suggest he beat.
Look,
but he did.
it was close.
I thought
It was close. It was
actually.
fine. It was.
But like I said, I need to see him, in bigger fights. Of course, he was able to beat Zhang Wale or whatever, whatever the big Chinese monster's name was in that weight division. He was able to beat him. But at the end of the day, I need to see more from him.
Close fight. It's competitive. Joseph Parker, phenomenal win, but also had a loss to Joe Joyce. That's had some losses
Agreed.
in the past. Hrgovic is undefeated. Hrgovic has some quality wins. I'm not counting the last one, which was something else entirely. But to me, Hrgovic, decorated amateur, undefeated as a professional, beat Zheli Zhang, has beaten some good guys in his career. That to me is the clear number 3.
I think it's hard to judge it because I think there's so many fighters there who can perform and underperform.
And can stay
And
exciting.
I mean, consistently do box that way, and so it's almost that, or however good you were in your last sort of fight. And then if we say that, then we have to put Dubois in that mix all of a sudden, which you wouldn't put nowhere near that. I wouldn't put him top 3, but I mean, he had a fantastic performance against Gerard Miller. But how good is Miller though? Again,
let's not forget the talk around Joe.
Well, if we're talking about Danny Dubois is not only not within the top 3, I'm not even quite sure if he's within the top 10. He probably isn't.
Before Zhili Zhang destroyed him back to back. All right, in terms of winning in this one, I guess everyone here is going to go for AJ. What are we going for? Stoppage? Points?
Yeah, I think AJ round 6.
Hey, I'm forgetting one thing that would put more pressure on AJ. You heard His Excellency say, I specifically made this fight because I want AJ to beat this guy. I want him to be my mercenary to protect boxing that I love so much. So that's even more pressure on AJ. But I think this goes the distance. And I think AJ wins on point.
I agree with you, sir. I agree with you a lot. Let me also give this guy a certain amount of credit. I remember watching WWE when I was younger. This guy was a commentator for WWE quite a lot, but then eventually he went to boxing. Every single time that I see this guy commentate on something, it usually is involved with a high degree of intelligence. In my personal view, I usually like a lot of his commentary.
What does that say about heavyweight boxing that an MMA guy can come in and go the distance with the former unified heavyweight champion and the current WBC champion?
No, I'm with Barry. I think AJ gets.
Well, you can maybe state overall that heavyweight is a little bit weaker if you wanted to, but in my view, Francis Ngannou, he's just a phenomenal athlete, a freakish monster athlete.
Stoppage somewhere in the second half of the fight between round 6 and 9.
Anthony Joshua knockout, and it's going to be a pretty one-sided knockout. I think he beats down Ngannou the way Tyson Fury should have.
All right, knockout chaos coming your way very, very soon. Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou. I don't think this one will go to points.
We'll see about that. Personally, I am going to predict that it goes to points, or at least a latter round stoppage, maybe to round 7 or round 8. I just don't think overall that's going to happen early, but I could be wrong. We'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. We'll see what happens. Thank you all so much for watching.